I used to be the golden child of my family, star student, on full scholarship varsity athlete, with a promising future, and the son my deeply religious parents proudly introduced at church. Then came the Sunday dinner, when my best friend Aaron's sister Melissa showed up at our doorstep, tears streaming down her face, claiming I had gotten her pregnant. My denials meant nothing. By nightfall, my parents had chosen a stranger's word over mine, and I was packing a bag while my father said the words I will never forget: "You are no longer our son." Before I tell you how one lie destroyed my family and took 5 years of my life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And hit subscribe if you have ever been wrongfully accused of something that changed everything. Growing up in Mapleton, Iowa population, 8,000 meant everyone knew everyone. My family had deep roots there, with my father running a successful insurance agency and my mother teaching 4th grade at the local elementary school. We attended First Baptist Church every Sunday, where my parents were respected pillars of the community. Faith and reputation were everything to them. I met Aaron Weber in 7th grade, when we were paired for a science project. Despite our different backgrounds, we clicked immediately. While my family was strictly religious, his was more laid back. Aaron and I shared a passion for basketball science and classic rock music. By high school, we were inseparable, spending weekends playing video games in his basement or shooting hoops at the community center. Aaron had a younger sister named Melissa. 3 years behind us in school, she always seemed to be orbiting our friendship, looking for ways to insert herself into conversations or activities. Even back then, Melissa had a reputation for drama. She would exaggerate stories, create conflicts between friends, and sometimes make up elaborate tales for attention. Aaron would often apologize for her behavior, explaining that their parents' rocky marriage and eventual divorce had been hard on her. Throughout high school and into college, I maintained a polite but distant relationship with Melissa. We were never alone together, never exchanged phone numbers, and certainly never had any romantic involvement. In fact, I barely thought about her existence, except when she occasionally interrupted Aaron and me to ask for rides or money. By senior year of college, I was exactly where I had planned to be, maintaining my full academic scholarship at State University, 70 miles from home, with graduation just months away. I had already received acceptance letters from 3 medical schools and was leaning toward the one offering the most financial aid. My parents were immensely proud, constantly telling church friends about their son, the future doctor. Everything changed after a party at Aaron's off-campus apartment during finals week. It was a small gathering, just 10 or so people celebrating the end of the semester. I showed up around 8, had exactly 1 beer, and left by 9:30 to study for my organic chemistry final. Melissa had been there, which was unusual since she was only a freshman at the community college across town. I remembered her watching me throughout the evening, but we exchanged maybe 5 words of small talk. In the weeks that followed, I noticed Melissa appearing more frequently around campus, often in places where I studied or ate lunch. Once she sat at my table in the library without invitation, asking oddly personal questions about my family and religious beliefs. I mentioned this to Aaron, who shrugged it off. "She is going through another attention-seeking phase. Just ignore her." I went home for Sunday dinner 3 weeks later, as I did whenever my study schedule allowed. My mother had made pot roast, my father was discussing church business, and we were having a typical family meal when the doorbell rang. My father answered it, and I heard a female voice breaking with emotion. When he returned to the dining room, Melissa was with him, her face streaked with tears. "Clyde," my father said, his voice tight with anger I had never heard before. "This young lady says she needs to speak with you and us about a very serious matter." Before I could even process what was happening, Melissa launched into her story, sobbing as she described how we had been secretly seeing each other for months. According to her elaborate lie, we had slept together multiple times, and now she was 6 weeks pregnant. She claimed I had been ignoring her calls and texts since she told me about the pregnancy. I sat there in absolute shock, my fork frozen midway to my mouth. "That is completely false," I finally managed to say. "I barely know her. She is my friend's sister. We have never been alone together, let alone had any relationship." My mother's face had turned to stone. My father's complexion darkened to a dangerous red. "Are you calling this young woman a liar?" he demanded. "Yes, absolutely," I insisted, my voice growing stronger with indignation. "This is insane. I have no idea why she would make up something like this." Melissa's tears came harder. She opened her phone and showed my parents what she claimed were text messages between us discussing our relationship and later the pregnancy. I caught a glimpse of them, messages I had never sent, from a number I did not recognize saved under my name in her phone. "I never sent those," I said, pulling out my own phone. "Look at my messages. There is nothing to her. I do not even have her number saved." "You obviously deleted them," my father said dismissively. "Or used another phone," my mother added, her voice trembling with disappointment. For 2 hours the nightmare continued in our living room. I maintained my innocence while Melissa spun an increasingly detailed web of lies. She knew things about our house that made her story seem credible, details she could have learned from her brother or social media. She described my childhood bedroom accurately. She mentioned the prayer my family said before meals. All information she could have gotten from Aaron, but to my parents, these details made her story ring true. "We raised you better than this," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "To take advantage of a girl and then abandon her. I never touched her." I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "Call Aaron right now. He will tell you I have never shown any interest in his sister." When my father called Aaron, the betrayal deepened. "Sir, I did not want to get involved," Aaron said, his voice audible on speakerphone. "But I have suspected for a while that something was going on between them. Clyde asked me not to tell anyone." Another lie. A coordinated attack. I was speechless. By the end of the evening, my father delivered an ultimatum that would alter the course of my life. "You have two choices," he said, his voice cold and final. "Either you admit what you have done, marry this girl, and raise this child as a man of faith should, or you are no longer welcome in this house or this family." "I cannot admit to something I did not do," I said, my voice breaking. "I would take a paternity test right now if I could." "By the time that baby is born and tested, your soul will be even further from God," my mother said. "And what if you are the father? You will have wasted precious months you could have spent making this right." They had already decided my guilt. The parents who had raised me to believe in honesty and integrity were now insisting I confess to a lie. When I continued to maintain my innocence, my father pointed to the door. "Pack what you need and go. When you are ready to take responsibility and ask forgiveness from God and this young woman, you can contact us. Until then, you are no longer our son." I packed a bag in stunned silence, taking my laptop, some clothes, and my savings passbook. As I walked out the door of my childhood home, my father's final words followed me. "Your mother and I will pray that God softens your hardened heart." I looked back once to see Melissa being comforted by my parents, on the porch of the home where I was no longer welcome. Her eyes met mine briefly, and I saw something I will never forget, the faintest smile of victory. The first 3 nights after being disowned, I slept in my car in the university parking lot. I had an apartment lined up for after graduation, but it would not be available for another 2 months, and my current housing was a dorm room I would lose access to once the semester ended in 2 weeks. My meal plan was running out, and my small savings would not last long. I tried to focus on my finals, but concentration was impossible. The organic chemistry exam I had been studying for the night. Everything fell apart. I failed it. The professor who had written me a glowing medical school recommendation called me to his office. "What happened, Clyde? This is not like you." I considered telling him the truth, but could not bring myself to vocalize the humiliating lie that had derailed my life. "Family emergency," I muttered. As news of Melissa's pregnancy spread through our small college community, whispers followed me everywhere. Aaron had apparently been busy sharing his sister's version of events, embellishing it with fabricated concerns he had supposedly had about our secret relationship. People who had been friendly for years now avoided eye contact. A girl from my study group moved seats when I sat down. My phone remained silent. No calls from friends asking for my side of the story. I tried contacting my parents, thinking a few days might have softened their stance. My calls went straight to voicemail. I drove by their house once and saw my mother in the garden. When she spotted my car, she turned and walked inside without acknowledgement. With my grades plummeting and my focus shattered, the medical school that had been my top choice rescinded its acceptance. The others followed within weeks. The scholarship that had covered my tuition required maintaining a 3.5 GPA, which my final semester destroyed. I graduated by the skin of my teeth, a hollow achievement, with no family in attendance, and a mountain of new debt from the final semester. With nowhere to go in a town where everyone seemed to believe I was a heartless man who had abandoned a pregnant girl, I packed everything I owned into my 12-year-old Honda and drove to Chicago. The city's anonymity felt like a blessing after the suffocating judgment of my hometown. Finding work was harder than I expected, with an incomplete medical school application process on my resume. After dozens of rejections, I landed a job as a lab technician at a medical testing facility, making barely above minimum wage. My studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood consumed most of my paycheck, leaving little for food and nothing for savings. Every month I received calls or letters from Melissa's parents demanding I step up and support their daughter and the baby that was not mine. I changed my phone number twice, but they always seemed to find me. I started keeping a journal documenting every false claim, every threatening message, in case I ever had the resources to fight back legally. 6 months after I left home, Melissa gave birth to a boy she named Matthew James, with the middle name suspiciously similar to my own James. This, of course, was presented to my family and community as further evidence of my involvement. Child support demands began arriving through official channels, requiring a legal response I could not afford. Letters from my parents came sporadically. Never personal notes, just religious materials. Bible passages about the prodigal son, pamphlets, about repentance books, about responsible fatherhood. Once a check for $300 arrived, with a note saying, "For the baby's needs." I tore it up. Depression became my constant companion. I worked, came home to my empty apartment, and tried not to think about the future that had been stolen from me. Trust felt like an impossible concept. If my own parents could discard me so easily, if my best friend could betray me so completely, what was the point of forming new connections? My lowest point came during a winter night about 18 months after leaving home. Sitting on my threadbare couch, staring at another legal notice about child support arrears I could not pay, I considered ending it all. The unfairness felt too massive to bear. What stopped me was a flyer I had picked up earlier that day, about a youth center needing volunteers. Something about helping kids who had their own struggles pulled me back from the edge. The Jackson Street Youth Center became my salvation. 3 evenings a week I helped teenagers with homework, taught basic science concepts, and occasionally joined their basketball games. These kids, many from broken homes themselves, asked no questions about my past and accepted me simply for showing up consistently. It was there I met Jackson Williams, the lawyer who ran the center's weekend basketball program. After months of casual conversation during games, we started grabbing dinner occasionally. When he asked about my family and I, deflected for the 3rd time, he finally said, "Whatever it is, I am guessing it involves legal trouble you cannot afford to address." That night, over burgers at a dive bar, I told another human being the full story for the first time. Jackson listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Have you ever taken a paternity test?" he asked when I finished. "I cannot afford the legal process to demand one," I explained. "And she has refused any private testing." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "I know some family law attorneys. Let me make some calls. This is not right, Clyde." For the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt a flicker of hope that someone believed me. It would be another 2 years before that hope materialized into anything concrete, but Jackson's friendship carried me through. I slowly rebuilt a life, a better apartment, a promotion at work, even a few cautious new friendships. The weight remained, but I learned to carry it. Then, 4 years after Melissa's lie tore my life apart, my phone rang with a number I still recognized despite all the time that had passed. Aaron's number. "Clyde," he said when I answered, his voice breaking. "I need to talk to you. I know you probably hate me, but this is important." "Why would I talk to you?" I asked, my voice cold. "Because I know the truth now," he replied. "About Melissa. About the baby. All of it. And I am so sorry. The Chicago winter had never felt so cold as it did that day in the coffee shop where I agreed to meet Aaron. 4 years of exile of rebuilding my life, piece by painful piece. And now here was the architect of my destruction, sitting across from me with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. I was helping Melissa move apartments. Last weekend, Aaron began unable to meet my gaze. I found something while packing up her desk. DNA test results. My heart pounded so loudly, I was certain everyone in the cafe could hear it. The father is Tyler, he continued. Tyler Jenkins. My roommate back then. He and Melissa had been hooking up in secret for months before the party. The baby is his, Tyler Jenkins. The name hit me like a physical blow. I remembered him vaguely, a business major who lived with Aaron senior year. I had barely interacted with him. Why was all I could manage to ask? Why me? Aaron's explanation unfolded like a horror story. Melissa had gotten pregnant accidentally. Tyler wanted nothing to do with the baby or a relationship. Desperate and afraid, she had concocted a plan to find a better father for her child, someone stable and responsible, who might be pressured into doing the right thing. She chose you because of your family. Aaron admitted shame evident in every word. Your religious parents, their focus on reputation and responsibility. She thought they would force you to marry her, give her child a name, support them both. And you went along with this. I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She told me you had made a move on her at the party, he said. That you had been texting her. I believed her because she is my sister. When the pregnancy happened, she swore it was yours. I never saw the messages she faked. I just trusted her. While doubting me, your friend, of 10 years, he had no answer for that. When Aaron confronted Melissa with the DNA test, she broke down and confessed everything. The elaborate plan, the fake text messages, the calculated targeting of me and my family, precisely because of their religious values. She never anticipated that they would completely cut me off, or that I would stand firm in denying paternity. Her plan had been for a quick marriage, perhaps a confession of the truth years later when everything was settled. She thought you would cave under the pressure, Aaron explained. When you did not, things spun out of control. She was too deep in the lie to back out. As for Tyler, he and Melissa had continued their relationship off and on throughout the years with him, occasionally providing some support but refusing to publicly acknowledge the child as his. The DNA test had been done recently during a custody argument. I told her she has to come clean, Aaron said. To everyone. Your parents, our parents, the whole community back home. She agreed, but I wanted to find you first to tell you myself. I sat in stunned silence, years of pain crystallizing into a cold, hard fury. You understand this destroyed my life, I finally said. Medical school, my family, everything. Aaron nodded, tears now flowing freely. I cannot fix what happened, but I want to help make it right. Whatever you need me to do. Jackson, my lawyer friend, had prepared me for this moment without knowing it would ever come. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. You are going to record everything you just told me, I said, and then we are going to get the same from your sister. The confrontation with Melissa happened 2 days later in Jackson's office. Facing potential legal consequences, including fraud and defamation, she tearfully confessed the entire scheme on record. Tyler was summoned next, cornered with the evidence and his parental obligations. Legal proceedings moved swiftly after that. Jackson connected me with a family law specialist who worked pro bono to have my name removed from any connection to the child. Tyler's paternity was officially established. The financial claims against me were dismissed. Then came the hardest part, my parents. Jackson sent them a certified package containing all the evidence, the recorded confessions, the DNA test results, the legal documents clearing my name. A week later, my phone rang with my childhood home number. Clyde. My mother's voice tentative and breaking. We need to see you. Please. 5 years after being cast out, I drove back to Mapleton. The town looked exactly the same, though I was fundamentally changed. I had insisted on meeting in the public park, rather than their home, unwilling to step back into the house where I had been so easily discarded. They were already there, when I arrived, looking older than I remembered. My mother rose immediately, moving as if to embrace me, then stopping herself when she saw my rigid posture. "We believe you now," my father said, his voice lacking its former authority. "We know you were telling the truth." "5 years too late," I replied. The park bench felt like neutral territory, a no-man's land between my past and present. My parents sat across from me, their faces etched with grief and regret that had come 5 years too late. The playground behind us echoed with children's laughter, a stark contrast to the heavy silence between us. "We failed you completely," my father finally said, his voice cracking with emotion I had never heard from him before. "When we should have been your strongest defenders, we became your accusers." My mother could barely speak through her tears. "We have prayed every day for your forgiveness, even before we knew the truth. We were wrong, so terribly wrong." They had received the package from Jackson and spent days in shock and grief as they absorbed the reality of what had happened. The DNA test results, Melissa's recorded confession, the legal documents clearing my name. The evidence was undeniable, and it shattered the narrative they had been clinging to for 5 years. "Melissa came to see us," my father said. "She confessed everything in person, begged for our forgiveness. We told her that was not ours to give." I sat silently, letting their words wash over me without response. What could I possibly say that would convey the depth of my pain? The holidays spent alone. The career dreams abandoned. The years of struggling to survive while carrying the weight of their rejection. "We tried to find you so many times," my mother said. "Your number was changed. Friends said you had moved away. We sent letters to your university address, but they came back." "I was living in my car for a while," I said flatly. "Then a studio apartment I could barely afford in Chicago. Working minimum wage jobs instead of going to medical school. Fighting depression and false paternity claims with no support system." They flinched at each detail, the reality of my exile hitting them with full force. "The church has been told the truth," my father added, as if this might matter to me now. "Pastor Williams made a public apology on your behalf last Sunday." "I do not need their apologies," I said. "I do not need anything from Mapleton anymore." We talked for hours as the sun moved across the sky. They explained how Melissa's evidence had seemed so convincing, how their fear for my soul had clouded their judgment, how they had convinced themselves that tough love would bring me back to the right path. None of it excused their choice, and they knew it. I told them about my life now. My job at the medical testing facility, recently promoted to department supervisor, the youth center, where I volunteered, my small circle of new friends. I did not tell them about the nights of despair, the suicide contemplation, the ongoing therapy. Some wounds were still too raw to expose. "Can we be part of your life again?" My mother finally asked the question that hung between us like a physical presence. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "You were supposed to love me unconditionally. Instead, you chose a stranger's word over mine. How do we come back from that?" "We do not expect forgiveness right away," my father said. "Or maybe ever. But we would like the chance to try to earn back some small place in your life, on whatever terms you set." I left them that evening with a promise, only to think about it. No commitments, no forgiveness, no happy reunion. Just an acknowledgement that the door might not be permanently closed. Over the following months, I allowed limited contact. Weekly phone calls strictly timed. Occasional emails. They respected my boundaries with a carefulness that would have meant everything if it had existed 5 years earlier. I returned to Chicago, and my reconstructed life now freed from the legal cloud that had hung over me. With Jackson's help, I applied to a post-baccalaureate pre-medical program, taking evening classes to rebuild my academic record. The medical school dream had been deferred, not destroyed. Aaron reached out periodically, sending careful texts that I sometimes answered, sometimes ignored. Our friendship would never be what it was, but I found I could not maintain active hatred for someone who had finally done the right thing, however belatedly. Melissa sent one letter of apology, which I read and burned without response. She had named another man as Matthew's father on the birth certificate, and moved away from Mapleton, the judgment of the community, apparently too much to bear once the truth emerged. A year after that first meeting in the park, I invited my parents to Chicago to attend a small ceremony, where I was receiving an award for my work at the youth center. They sat in the back row, made no demands on my time, and left a card at my apartment door afterward, thanking me for allowing them to witness a glimpse of the man I had become without them. Slowly, painfully, we began building something new. Not the blind trust of before, but a cautious relationship with clearly defined boundaries and expectations. When they asked to help financially with my medical school applications, I declined. This journey would be mine alone. I met Alicia at the youth center, a social worker with kind eyes and a calm presence that put even the most troubled teens at ease. On our third date, I told her my full story, expecting the usual awkward reaction. Instead, she took my hand and said, "What impresses me most is not that you survived, but how you chose to rebuild." 2 years after the truth came out, I was accepted to medical school in Chicago. My parents attended the white coat ceremony, sitting quietly where I had assigned them, making no claims on my achievement, but visibly proud nonetheless. We had family dinner once a month now, sometimes with Alicia joining us. The conversation remained careful, the relationship fragile but healing. The most important lesson I learned from those 5 years in exile was not about forgiveness or even resilience. It was about standing firmly in your own truth, even when everyone around you refuses to see it. There is power in that solitary stand that no one can take from you. The family I was born into failed me at the moment I needed them most. The family I have built since, from friends like Jackson to my relationship with Alicia to the teens I mentor, has never asked me to be anything but exactly who I am. Blood guarantees nothing. Actions reveal everything. For those of you watching who have been wrongfully accused, abandoned by people who should have defended you, or are rebuilding your life after betrayal, know that there is a path forward. It is neither straight nor easy, but it exists. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone who deeply hurt you? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience. Consider sharing this with someone struggling to stand in their truth when the world doubts them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the longest, hardest roads lead to the most meaningful destinations.